So it has a Brew squee. I also have some chocolate spread sandwiches, of which I've already taken a bite. End of the loaf, so hence the crustette. Anyway, title of this video: Samsung versus Apple versus Samsung. They've kind of won. I said they've kind of won. They have won, but it's not final yet. So they've kind of won the lawsuit. It still needs to go through appeals and blah blah blah. Essentially, Apple have won damages of $1 billion ish. A bit more than $1 billion, but so I thought I'd explain a few things to the Apple fan base because they're a bunch of idiots and they were shouting about things on Twitter last night and they haven't got an effing clue, as per usual. So, Engadget point of reference right here. There you go. I should put a link in the description below of that, which is relevant to this. Essentially, well, I'm going to explain some patenty things. Basically, a lot of mainly tech companies in the US have some bullshit patents. What I mean by bullshit patents is patents that essentially are so generic they could really be relevant to anybody or anything. Stupid things like voice recognition, but not actually going into the technology that actually identifies the voice, just voice recognition in general. Other things like a home button, so one singular button that takes you straight home, aka the iPhone. And then there's other things which are to do with trade dress, which is a bit different. And to be honest, Samsung kind of deserve that, really. So Apple have got this BS, or several BS patents, as is Samsung, as is Microsoft, as is a load of people. And basically they wanted to sue them for, well, essentially copying their GUI and copying a few bits and pieces. But it was only for this one device, really. Now the trade dress thing, and if you don't know what trade dress is, basically it protects the visual identity of the company. So the iPhone, for instance, is quite an identifiable thing. Even if you didn't have the Apple logo on it, you know that it's an iPhone. But what Samsung have done, they kind of copied that with the 3GS. They kind of copied the design kind of slightly. I mean, it's quite obvious that it isn't exactly the same, but the court thought that it was enough to award damages to Apple because it's kind of reduced the brand, or reduced the value of the brand by, putting Samsung on it and blah blah blah. So the trade dress thing is kind of fair enough. Also, this isn't actually a victory for Apple and Samsung. Essentially, all it is really is Samsung America versus Apple America. Although Apple America is kind of Apple, so I suppose it kind of is, but only Samsung in America, so nowhere else. So essentially, although it kind of relates to Samsung Korea, who are the people that are the big, the big corporation behind it all, because of the way the law works in America, the way the patent law works as well, because it's an international kind of agreement, sort of. Now in the UK, they tried to do this, Apple tried to do this with the Galaxy Tab. Now because our lawyers, because our judges aren't idiots, and because, well, they kind of are, but they're not as idiotic as American judges, and they weren't lobbied by the likes of Apple or Samsung, they threw the case out of court. They said, don't be so bloody ridiculous, it's quite clear that Samsung device is not an Apple device. And then the actual hearing from it, or the actual end product, was that Apple had to produce an advert, or they had to say that the Samsung Galaxy Tab didn't copy the iPad, essentially, in not so many words. And it's the same with America, with the EU and things like that. So really, all it really relates to is America, which is why they've managed to get the Galaxy Tab banned in America and other things like that, and other places in the world like Australia, because it works on a country by country / region basis. Obviously, the EU is a bit different because the EU's got a kind of European court and it's a bit weird, and so yeah, that's a bit different. But essentially, what does this mean? Well, really all it means is reduce innovation. Because Apple can't innovate anymore, it seems, in terms of their OS. I'm going to put that out there and say that's quite true, because they've copied a lot of Android features. Because they can't innovate anymore, they have to now sue. But they're suing over something so minor. I mean, trade dress, yes, okay, fair enough, I kind of get that, but it's still not close enough that you'd sort of think, well, that's an iPhone, because it's not an iPhone, it's quite clearly a Samsung device. So yeah, it was just kind of because Samsung can't because Apple can't innovate anymore, they have to do bullshit lawsuits. And I say they can't innovate anymore because their OS is pretty much as nailed down as it possibly could be in terms of all the features it's going to include, and it's copied a lot of features from Android. Because, you know, Android kind of is at the moment the key player, and to be honest, from my point of view, I think Android's good. The features it's got are better than the iPhone. Yes, I have an iPad, but that's for various different reasons. I wouldn't get an Android tablet because I wouldn't. I've got an Android phone. I would never switch to an Apple device. Blah blah blah. But that's basically that. I just thought I'd sort of explain a few things if that makes any sense. But essentially, basically every tech company in the world and other companies have bullshit patents that they own that basically are so generic it's ridiculous. They file them in court in Texas, and they award them to people, or they award them to companies for some unknown, weird and wonderful reason. But the only thing to add is that Apple haven't won one just yet. Yes, they've won, but not in so many words. They still have to go through appeal, and it still has to sort of been worked out. Apple and Samsung have both released their statements, which you can see on the Engadget site, which is down below. I'm not going to read them out because they're very, very long and convoluted, but essentially what Apple has said is that this is a great victory for us and great victory for blah blah blah, and investing our time and service and blah. And Samsung have basically said this is a loss for the consumer. And I suppose essentially they're right, because it means less innovation, increased prices of the products, and fewer choices. And I suppose really that's essentially correct, really. But yeah, so apart from that, I mean, this video's gone on for way too long, but apart from that, I shall leave you to it. I shall drink my Brew squee, I shall eat my chocolate spread sandwiches, and I shall catch you in a later video.